Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Well, I hope everybody had a really good Christmas and a really good time to spend with family. I hope you enjoyed the holidays wherever you spent them, whether it was home or perhaps on vacation, or maybe it was grandma's house or grandpa's house, someplace like that. We stayed home, and we always feel like that's the safest thing to do because a lot of people drink over the holidays and then they drive. And that presents a problem for me in that I don't want to wind up as street pizza somewhere. So, today, what I thought I might do is take a look back at some of the more notable cases in 2023 and see what we can learn from them. And I think there are some lessons to be taught here. So the first case I want to look at is Murdaugh. Murdaugh is an interesting case from a number of perspectives, not the least of which is the trial dynamics that went on and the way in which the case was presented. The end of that case it was a ends justified the means kind of thing, I think. They used a lot of evidence that was more or less character evidence that didn't really go to the issue of whether or not he committed the murder. As I've said before, it is often the case that a prosecutor will try to use as much evidence as possible to demonstrate that someone is a bad person. And this is where the use of the evidence is most acute, where you have somebody accused of one crime but admitting to several others. And so that was, I think, one of the main reasons I felt like there might be appeals in this case, and those appeals might have some merit. Not because I think Judge Smart did the wrong thing, because I think admitting that evidence clearly went to motive. Even though he denied that motive, it clearly went to that motive. And so I think there was a legitimate reason to admit it. However, my problem is more along the lines of that at some appellate court where they're not looking at the record, they're not watching the live stream, they're not looking at Mr. Murdaugh's eyes, and they're not paying attention to his body language or anything else. They're just reading a cold record, that an appellate court might feel like the judge stepped over the line there. So I'm worried about that. I was worried about that. Now I'm worried about a whole new thing. Because as carefully and as smartly and as well played as Creighton Waters did in that case to get the conviction, he might very well have it all that pretty bow untied by an appellate court or by the trial court if it determines that this clerk made inappropriate comments to a jury. And even though I truly believe that Murdaugh is guilty based on the evidence, I honestly think that there is a pretty good chance that the court is going to send it back for a retrial. And the reason is because we can't be certain. We can't, even though there are competing affidavits and Party A says one thing and Party B says another thing, the risk to Murdaugh of a jury that was swayed by inappropriate comments is simply too great. And I'm afraid it's going to come back. Plus, there's all this other attendant drama around her son's arrest and her phone and all this other malarkey. I see that as being a real problem here. And I'm pretty sure that Murdaugh is going to come back, so we'll get another chance to go through this trial again, unless he does the honorable thing and pleads guilty and takes another life sentence. Because I don't think Creighton Waters or the Attorney General of the state of South Carolina is going to accept a plea to manslaughter. I think they're going to require a plea to murder one, and that's exactly what they should require. So I have to see how that plays out, and that assumes that this replacement judge for Judge Smart, who's now been appointed by the Supreme Court, determines that we need to have a new trial. And like I said, that's probably about a 90-10 bet, 90% in favor, 10% against. We'll just have to see how that goes. Turning now to another issue that came up is the issue of self-defense. So I think the two best cases that sort of represent the whole of self-defense are Hannah Payne and Travis Rudolph. In both cases, the jury got it absolutely right. In the case of Travis Rudolph, he was attacked by people with guns who shot at him, and who were clearly attempting to end his life with firearms. They were part of a larger conspiracy with a woman that had been involved with, and in my opinion, they were all acting in concert to bring about unaliving Mr. Rudolph. Instead of prosecuting them for attempting to end his earthly existence, what the state did was they prosecuted Travis Rudolph for firing back, for shooting back at people who were shooting at him. Think about that for a minute. If there could be any clearer case of self-defense, I don't know what it would be. And the man should never have been brought up on charges. It was a gross abuse of prosecutorial discretion, and I think I covered it fairly well on the channel. Contrast that case, where there was a clear, imminent, and deadly threat against him, with the case of Hannah Payne, who was not involved in the original accident, who disregarded instructions from the 911 operator, who chased the man down, went to his driver's side door with a pistol in her hand, and then a tragedy ensued. Now, even if you believe that the other guy tried to pull the trigger or did pull the trigger on Ms. Payne, you have to accept the fact that she was very clearly the aggressor. And under common law, under almost every state's law, you cannot be the initial aggressor and claim self-defense. And that's what she did, and that's exactly why she lost. And the idea that she wouldn't have taken a plea when it would clearly have benefited her, a little hard to understand in my opinion. I'm sure her lawyer covered his behind very, very well by indicating to her that the best option you have is to take this plea, and she didn't want to take it. The next case I want to talk about is Ynw Melly. This is a case that had lots and lots and lots of interesting legal issues that arose, and very much like the Murdaugh case, after the trial was over, another issue arose. My problem with it is that that issue should have arisen well before the trial. It should have been disclosed much earlier, and I think it could have provided some really good fodder for some cross-examination.
Did you in fact threaten Jameson Francois?
The same answer, sir. We advised him that lying to us could result in their arrest.
Did you in fact tell him he would be deported to Haiti?
Yes.
Of the detective, and it might very substantially have altered the outcome of the case. And now what you have, by virtue of there being a mistrial in the first case and a retrial, you have the situation where both the rulings in the original trial as well as the rulings in the trial to come will be basis for an appeal. So they're certainly making some good work for an appellate lawyer. I'm not so certain that they will ever get to the appellate lawyer, because there really are enough red flags here to make you wonder what's going on with the prosecution. Now, again, all of the physical evidence, all of the timeline, all of that tracks very well with the prosecution's case. But just like the clerk has destroyed the conviction, I think, in the Murdaugh case, you have this, what I would call, rogue prosecutor deciding that something that was clearly a joke was not clearly a joke, and went to the state and demanded that a Brady issue come up and be disclosed to the defense. And now you wind up with the original prosecutor, who I thought did a pretty remarkable job at trial, now being kicked off the case, and the state has to find someone else to litigate this matter. And that is I think, a real problem for the state. And in addition to that, they're going to have to get past all of the pretrial publicity. The jury selection is going to be, in my humble opinion, which is not particularly well informed on the jury selection, but certainly, in my opinion, it would be very difficult to get a jury that didn't know something about the state's misconduct or the facts of this case, particularly in Broward County. And then you wind up with the issue of, can you get somebody to set aside those feelings? And even though somebody may have a bias or a predisposition to vote one way or the other, they can always say that they could put that aside, but how do you ever really know? And I don't think anybody ever really knows whether they can or not. So moving from that to the next case that I think is highly interesting here is the case of Gwyneth Paltrow, the ski accident case. And I thought that trial was rather unimaginative from the plaintiff's point of view. I thought that he had hired probably the least well prepared counsel I've seen try a plaintiff's case in a long time. Um, it's not a knock on them. Maybe they didn't have time to prepare. Maybe there were issues with their client. I don't know. But I didn't think the case was put together well. And then they came up against defense attorneys for Gwyneth Paltrow who were very well prepared and who had an animation done. This is a fairly new area in the law, the issue of animations, recreations, if you will, of events that happened that are put together based on the testimony of individual witnesses, and they may have to show 2 or 3 different versions of it in order to get compliance with a court order. But the bottom line is it allows the jury to see at least one side's view of how things happened. And so it's worthwhile to note that animations tend to be very, very compelling, primarily because of shows like CSI, because people now expect people to break out the individual science and the explanation for them, which is what an animation does. And I think once that animation showed, there was no question which way the jury was going to vote. And then the other case that has been very interesting to me has been the Adelson case. And I'm going to contrast that with the case against Lorie Phillips from Wisconsin. Now, in the Adelson case, the jury heard a lot of testimony that tied Adelson to the woman who set up the hit, which was that Magbanua. And then Magbanua tied the 2 hitters to the case. And then the 2 hitters also testified against Mr. Adelson. And it was completely unsurprising that the state got a guilty verdict in that case. And then Mama Adelson manages to get on the telephone, not realize she's talking to dead air, and make certain statements that wound up in getting her arrested. So we'll have her trial probably in 2024 or maybe early 2025. It depends on when the judge sets it. But that will be an especially interesting trial to pay attention to. Contrast that case where the jury absolutely got it right with the case of Lorie Phillips. The problem for Charlie was that his explanation that a TV was just a TV didn't track with the coded language around the way things were said. And of course, it was pretty much entirely undone by the guy from the police department approaching Donna Adelen. Now, you can have your belief that that was somewhat unfair, but cops get to break the rules all the time. And, sometimes it takes a thief to catch a thief. Well, sometimes it takes a little bit of thuggish behavior to catch somebody who is engaged in thuggish behavior. The bottom line was that Charlie Adelson's explanations and his theory of the case and how all this happened made absolutely no sense whatsoever when you are looking at the fact that the people who actually pulled the trigger in that case testified against him. I think if you went back and looked at jury verdicts in murder cases where the co-conspirators testified against the chief conspirator, you would find that in about 99.99% of those cases, the chief conspirator gets convicted. You don't have to look any further than Bryce Rhodes for that. But now let's take a look at what Lorie Phillips did. Lorie Phillips came in. She was straightforward. She asked for clarification when she didn't understand a question. She was a very good witness. She gave clear, straight, non-evasive answers. And in spite of the prosecutor's best attempts to trip her up on a timeline or on a location, she was She knew exactly what to say and how to say it. And the evidence in that case, particularly the video, which was neutral in that case, I think it made a pretty compelling argument for the fact that she wasn't guilty of intentionally killing her husband. So you look at that and you realize that when it comes to murder cases, just like with Travis Rudolph, Lorie Phillips is a case where the jury got it right by acquitting the defendant. Although I think there was a lot more reason to charge Lorie than there was to charge Travis Rudolph, and I don't think there was very much reason to charge Lorie in that case. Finally, I have to talk about the two crazies from Wisconsin. Yeah, Jesse Krzyzewski and Daryl Brooks. What a couple of pieces of work. Those two are each other's spirit animal when you really get right down to it. Jessie thought she was so smart and so clever. She reminded me of that line from How the Grinch Stole Christmas, about the Grinch was so smart and the Grinch was so slick that he thought up a lie and he thought it up quick. Well, that's Krzyzewski's entire life plan right there. She was completely unbelievable, and her theory was completely unbelievable, and her post-trial antics are completely unbelievable. And in that regard, she reminds me a lot of Daryl Brooks, whose in-trial antics were completely unbelievable, over the top, counterproductive, designed essentially to sabotage any compassion that the jury might have had for him. And he wound up being sentenced to prison such that the only thing that will be left after he is eligible to get out of prison, I don't think the prison will even be left after he's eligible to get out of prison. So those are the cases and the issues that I saw this year that I thought were noteworthy. What do you think? Let me know what you think in the comment the important cases were and what lessons you learned out of those cases. As always, if you're a new subscriber, thank you so much. If you're an old subscriber, I love you all. You guys are great. And again, if you have the opportunity today, go out and do something nice for someone. I'm taking my wife to lunch today. We're going to go to a place called Fusakli's, and if you're in the South, you probably have seen one. They're very good, little fried chicken places. Get little chicken, I guess you call them chicken strips, but they're very, very good. So we're going there. That's our plan for the day. And if you have the opportunity to do something nice for someone, please take it. If we do one little act of kindness for people every day, we make the world a better place, even though it may not always seem like it, particularly when you watch legal channels where we talk about murder and crime and everything else. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I hope you had a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.